we are all very excited about science and we hide behind that hubris of science. We still have a lot of operational challenges to really impact the lives of our patients.
Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast. Today's interview is with Sanjay Srivastava, Managing Director of Accenture's Centre of Excellence for Cell and Gene Therapy. We discuss how, despite the rapid scientific progress in this space, scaling up is proving a real challenge, and there's still a real gap between scientific innovation and operational excellence. Sanjay unpacks the intricacies of cell and gene manufacturing, offering practical solutions to challenges around scaling production, implementing automation, and balancing innovation with regulatory requirements. But first, over the past year, we've interviewed more than 100 experts in biopharma outsourcing, so we thought it would be useful to distill all those best practices into Outsourcing Fundamentals, an online training course that gives you and your team a foundation in successful outsourcing. Take this course for a comprehensive overview of the key trends shaping biopharma outsourcing. Over 4 hours, this course will give you 10 modules of expert insights and case studies including vendor selection, contract negotiation, quality oversight, tech transfers, and more. Each module comes with helpful resources, interactive quizzes, and a certificate of completion. Listeners to this podcast can get a full £100 off by using the code POD100, that's POD 100, when you get to the checkout. To find out more, head to pharmasource.global/fundamentals. Sanjay, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm looking forward to us having a really good conversation about the state of cell and gene therapy, the state of the market, and how CDMOs are supporting it. There's a really great report you sent me from Accenture about the cell therapy CDMO market insights and considerations, and I'm quite keen to get into that with you. But before we do, could you give us a bit about your background, please, and how you came to doing what you're doing at Accenture?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm an academic, essentially, converted into a consultant. And while I have left academia, I feel that academia hasn't left me. And the reason I say that is because the space that I operate in, as you know, cell and gene therapy is fairly new. Everybody's learning, and it's quite esoteric for people that are outside of this. Because success in this right now is pretty evident, requires a good understanding of the process biology in order to make the products that our patients need. And I got into this space, one, because of the background that I have, but also the serendipity of the market. In the mid-2010s, when I was a consultant, we helped launch the first CAR-T to market and ran a number of programs. It was a great learning experience, frankly, Luke, because at the time, we had no clue how to launch a first-in-class autologous cell therapy to market. And at that time, I felt two things. One was, of course, this is a truly curative medicine that we're trying to bring to the market. Why would I do anything else as a consultant? And second, it provided a learning opportunity for all of us that really stimulates me personally, as well as my team, who were also very excited to bring such therapies to market, and provided an opportunity to expand our skill sets and solution toolkit.
Great.
And for the last 10 years, I have been just doing cell and gene therapy and pretty much nothing else.
I mean, you say just doing it. There's so much to it, isn't there? This field is incredibly complicated.
Correct. And like I said, that's what makes it very, very exciting for us as management consultants, but also for our clients, because it gives a promise, a tremendous opportunity for us to transform healthcare and lives of our patients.
Yeah, absolutely. What then is Accenture's Centre of Excellence for Cell and Gene Therapy? How does it work? What are the kind of services you offer? Tell us about it, please.
That's a good question. Look, so Accenture, as you know, is one of the largest management consulting IT solution services company globally. And so the Center of Excellence sits within our life sciences practice. And we are a specialized set of resources that are serving our clients in this very, very, I would say, no longer a niche space, but a
Mm.
special place within life sciences industry, which is new. And because we are part of the Accenture, larger Accenture, we have access to all of Accenture resources, be it technology, design, strategy, operations, and everything that Accenture traditionally has been offering to our clients.
Hmm.
So, and our group provides services. We are about the core people is about 20 to 30 people, and then of course in technology, lot larger, globally spread out, both offshore as well as here in US and Europe. And the kind of services that we provide are primarily in the areas where our client needs most help, which
Hmm.
is supply chain, orchestration, manufacturing at scale, as well as during development. And third, commercialization, commercial launch support.
Hmm.
And now, with some of the CAR Ts and gene therapies in the market today, we are also providing support for the post launch for lifecycle management.
So as you look at the overall landscape for cell and gene therapy, where we are now, so second half of 2024, looking into 2025, how are you feeling about it generally? I mean, it's a field which has so much progress, so much regulatory changes, a lot coming through the pipeline. What would you say the most important things are right now in the market?
Yes, and I think if you pick up any ARM report, for example, or any other reports, you'll see tremendous activity
Hmm.
in cell and gene therapy from an innovation perspective. You know, over 1,000 clinical trials, hundreds of biotechs developing these therapies. So it's very exciting times from a science perspective, no doubt about it. And then, we started in oncology, but now we're moving into other therapeutic areas as well,
Hmm.
right? In neuroscience and autoimmune diseases, right? And then we're also moving now into solid tumors. I mean, we recently had a approval from Adaptimmune
Hmm.
for a solid tumor CAR T. So tremendously beneficial from innovation perspective. Having said that, I think as an industry, what concerns me is that we are all very excited about science and we hide behind that hubris of science.
Hmm.
We still have a lot of operational challenges to really impact the lives of our patients that we want to impact. So if you look at globally, how many eligible patients are really getting CAR Ts?
Hmm.
You know, less than 5%. And that's not ideal.
Hmm.
We would rather have more and more eligible patients getting these therapies. And the problems are, like I said, on operations, are our inability to make those products, manufacture them at scale, while maintaining the cost of operations. That's one big challenge. And the other is, of course, on the access side, which is these therapies are very, very complex, require specialized treatment centers to deliver these therapies at clinic.
You mentioned cost there. What is a typical cost right now per patient for one of these therapies?
Yes, so it ranges from $500,000 to almost now $4 million for gene therapies.
Wow.
So a wide range, depending on the indication and the incidence of the disease itself.
Hmm.
And the prices, obviously, pharmaceutical companies and others have justified the pricing where they are. So I would not comment on it, but I think rather focus more on the operational challenges, which I think are a lot more solvable um,
Mhm.
for us. And that's where we at Accenture um, support our clients a whole lot more.
Well, let's talk about that then. Let's talk about development and manufacturing. I think if you could set the scene. So, for people who maybe aren't as familiar with it as you, maybe they're used to the small molecule model, perhaps, where you manufacture, you distribute, and you're sort of done. How does it work within cell and gene therapy?
I think we have to really break this down by modalities.
Hmm.
So, for example, the most complex one, where it's a huge departure from the traditional model, is autologous cell and gene therapies, where where the patients become the source of the raw material.
Hmm.
And that requires a number of touch points for the hospital caregivers as well as manufacturers in order to take the raw material from the patient and make the product.
Mm.
That's a new paradigm in many ways. What is also interesting about that piece is the whole value chain when we are in clinical development and when we move to commercial doesn't necessarily change.
Mm.
And the
Yeah.
distribution model is exactly the same, other than, of course, the scale. So that's one type of therapies, which is autologous. Then you have what we call allogeneic cell therapies, as well as gene therapies, where let's first focus on the allogeneic cell therapies, which are similar to autologous, but it's simpler, and with a caveat, is that there individual patients are not the source of the raw material, but rather we take a healthy donor
Hmm.
and use their cells to make the product. So you can make larger batches rather than one batch equals one patient in autologous
Mm.
cell therapies. There, the distribution model is similar to the traditional biopharmaceutical industry. Similarly, in the gene therapy, in vivo gene therapy that are based on viral vectors, as a delivery, there is similar to allogeneic as well as biopharma biologics, where I'm making product at bulk and then distributing it.
Mm.
Now, they're still not exactly, and none of them are exactly the same. Autologous is obviously, it's very apparent that it's quite different, but the other two, allogeneic cell therapies and gene therapies, are still not similar to biologics. A couple of reasons. One is the cost. They're very, very
Hmm.
expensive to make, and even their price points, wholesale price points.
Mm.
Therefore, we're not necessarily making them in hundreds and thousands of doses like we might do for a tablet, we might do for other biologics. We're still making small batches. That's one. And second, because of the cost, there is a there's a distribution that is happening still just in time through value-added partners such as specialty pharmacies
Hmm.
and others. So there's some nuances, some distinctions, but closer to the biologics or
Yeah. Yeah.
orphan diseases.
So with autologous, then, how close does the manufacturing need to be to the clinic geographically? Is offshoring even possible?
That's a very good question, and I think we are all talking about this. This is on top of the mind of the industry for a couple of reasons. One, as I said, our inability to make the product at scale. So would we benefit to be closer to the hospital point of care, and then there is the burden of making 10,000 doses goes away. We're making smaller doses at a
Mm.
time. The other is That's one reason. The other reason why we are talking about this and the discourse is all about this is because right now we're taking the patient from wherever they might be to a qualified treatment centers, and those treatment centers may or may not be close to the patient.
Mm.
So today the paradigm is taking the patient to the treatment. Why not take the treatment to the patient?
Hmm.
And that would require us to be making the product closer to the patient,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
an example. And these are the two big reasons, and they both impact patient access, right? Now, will it be beneficial? So let's talk about it. In autologous cell therapy, there are two components to manufacturing. One is I need to extract cells from the patient.
Mm.
That's a GMP process because that cells become part of the product. So that process has to be controlled and that has to be done. Now, clearly, that can happen closer to the patient. That can happen by mobile apheresis labs. It can
Hmm.
happen, you can go to and blood donation centers and others that are equipped to do this procedure, so we can bring that closer to the patient. I think that's an easier problem to solve. The other is the actual manufacturing. of the therapy once you have the cells. Today, we are almost operating like a centralized hub,
Mm.
or in some cases, regional hubs by continent that is still requires that's not close to the patient. Patient is far, and that's a model that's currently operational. Now, with the technology that is coming about with the automation and robotics, it's conceivable that we can make manufacturing uh, to be closer to patient. Maybe even to the point of care that I can have a desktop machine that I do manufacturing right there
Hmm.
at the hospital, just like we do diagnostics today.
Mm.
We don't have to send all the samples to a central lab, which is how it used to happen 15, 20 years ago. Now diagnostics can happen within the hospital. Similarly, in the future, it's conceivable that might happen, but that would require a lot of changes in the policies and regulations, as
Mm.
well as skilling of the people at the hospitals and where they're going to come from. Are they going to come from CDMOs, sponsors,
Mhm.
or hospital that resources? Will they be able to make the product? So these are open questions.
Have there been any pilots of that model yet? Has anyone had a proof of concept in the market?
Clinical, that is happening already
Mm.
at the point of care manufacturing for clinical trials. And what we call those as academic CAR-Ts or academic uh, cell and gene therapies. For commercial, on the other hand, not yet.
Mm.
Not at the point of care, but regional, yes. Um, and Galapagos had announced that recently that they were doing it, but for point of care, there are a lot of still a lot of open questions and how we're
Sure.
going to do it, who's going to do it, what regulatory implications will it have on the BLA filing on behalf of the sponsors? Can we make an equivalent product at the
Mm.
point of care?
I was reading your report, the Cell Therapy CDMO Market Insights and Considerations report. And in that, one of the challenges which it flagged was around the issue of delivery. And based on all the interviews that you and your team did, it says that many of the sponsors have experienced slot booking and product delivery confirmations, but the CDMOs aren't delivering on time, and that the clients are suffering also from the other side from therapy administration rescheduling due to patient health and inability to move the production run. What's driving that? Why are operational issues so difficult to fix at the moment?
Right. So look, a couple of things to consider here. One
Mm.
is the type of patients that we're dealing with here. They're very, very well treated patients, which means that they have advanced diseases. And as a result, they are fairly unstable often. In fact, if you look at the statistics of how many patients that we actually do get infused
Mm.
is, maybe 80%, right? So we have almost 10 to 15 to up to 20%, depending on the indication, and attrition. Patients are not making it because the conditions change. So that's one factor that is we are seeing, and that's responsible for a lot of this changes in the schedule that happens.
Mhm.
So unhappy path is actually a norm rather than a happy path.
Sure.
So that's one contribution. The second factor is the manual processes. So a lot of these scheduling that we are doing today, especially in clinical and also in commercial, is often in spreadsheets or custom solutions that have latency, as you can
Mhm.
imagine, and our inability to react faster and make rapid decisions. That's the second factor. The third is the talent itself, right? If we are all so paper-based and so onerous processes, then we need army of people and dedicated to manage this exception process.
Mm.
And there is and we wrote about this a while back, and others have followed and said the same thing. The talent in the industry was scarce. Now you could argue that with a lot of the um, you know um, restructuring and the and the layoffs that has happened in the industry, maybe that's not the case anymore. But yet, specialized skills are still scarce.
Hmm.
And so, which means that when you have all these three factors on top of one another, you are inevitably going to see inefficiencies, and that happens at CDMOs, their ability to react, and that that has an implication because then the physicians lose confidence
Mm.
on the product and the manufacturer's ability to deliver on its promises. Right? And then CDMOs in particular have more challenges than the manufacturer themselves is because they're serving multiple clients simultaneously,
Hmm.
and they have constrained capacity and resources, and they have to juggle a lot. So until we get to a point where we have sophisticated scheduling algorithms and solutions,
Mm.
and as these therapies continue to move upstream, which we are already seeing with the success that CAR-T has almost become a standard of care. And as they move up in the formulary to second line and the first line, with where the patients are not as sick as they are today, we will see some decrease in variation and decrease in unhappy path
Yeah.
and more normal path.
You mentioned that sometimes physicians might lose confidence, understandably, if things aren't going well for them. And this is very much a partnership, isn't it? On the manufacturing side, the innovator and the physician, and of course, the patient. Is it possible to get like a bit of an overview on how you feel the whole medical community are feeling at the moment about cell and gene?
Yeah. No, that's an interesting question. In fact, we've done some market research and both for clients as well as our own about this. One is that uh, a lot of these therapies today are being delivered at academic medical centers,
Hmm.
right? So by nature, and I would say their more mission of these centers are to be supportive of innovation and innovative medicines. So they all want to partake in this journey with the sponsors. I've yet to see, I've come across a physician or a nurse for that matter to say that we're not going to take on this new therapy for clinical trials, for instance,
Hmm.
because they see their patients and they want to serve their patients. And if there's no good option, and if this experimental therapy were to offer that, they want to they want to try it,
Hmm.
right? That's a given almost. When they hesitate is when they already have CAR-Ts for an indication, and if another one is coming in and saying, "Me too." No, for example, multiple myeloma, we already have two. DLBCL, we have two CAR-Ts. As more and more will come, that's when we are seeing the doctors and physicians are saying, "Okay, why? Why should
Hmm.
we take the third one or the fourth one on? How do we know that this is better, especially on the execution side? What confidence can you give us?
Yep.
What is your out of spec rates? Are they better than the therapies that are currently on the market or worse?" So those are becoming key questions on when you have Me Too drugs. But otherwise, they are truly very, very, very receptive and want to take those on.
Hmm.
Um,
Interesting.
right. And then the confidence. So because I was saying, especially in autologous cell therapy, and not that's not just necessarily true for autologous, but also for allo cell therapies as well as gene therapies, is the number of touch points that we have today between sponsors and hospitals. It has become very collaborative.
Hmm.
It is not as straightforward, like as you said in the beginning of the podcast, where I make the product in bulk, ship it off to the specialty distributor. They have it there, and the pharmacies are going to just keep asking as their inventory depletes, and you get furnishing. There's really pretty much hands off, other
Hmm.
than the field force that is going and calling on physicians to inform them of the products and the merits of those products so that they can, um, prescribe them to the patients, the right
Hmm.
medicine, and with an informed opinion. But outside of that, there was very little interaction. But now there is a lot more stakeholder engagement the entire hospital engagement model has been set up, and with different roles that
Mm.
sponsors have to support the centers to have this complex therapeutics delivered to the patient in clinic very safely.
Thank you. What would it take for cell therapy to be able to manufacture at scale? I mean, one of the things which comes through in the report is that automation is there. There are solutions that exist, but that sponsors are hesitant to adopt them. What's holding back the adoption of these sorts of tools?
Couple of things, and let me break the question up a bit.
Hmm.
The first is, are what is stopping us to make the product at scale, and what is the problem? Why is it that industry continues to struggle? I think the problem is, as I was saying, it's about science. It is not like making widgets, or it's not like so as simple as, small molecules where I get the API, I do the formulation, and it's pretty predictable process. Here, there are a couple of compounding factors. One is that these are complex, in other words, that I have this gene that is implicated in my disease, and I'm trying to modulate that gene. And in the autologous cell therapy or allogeneic cell therapy, when I have the donor giving me the cells, there is a variability. My
Hmm.
cells are going to be very different than your cells, Luke, or anybody else. They're all going to have different cells when they are extracted. And so that variability is inherent in the process.
Hmm.
But then we have a recipe to use those cells to make the product, which is fixed. And then you are expecting to have a consistent product at the end. It's not going to happen. Think
Hmm.
about making a tomato soup. If I have a ripe green tomatoes and I have a recipe to make tomato soup, it's going to come out with the same taste all the time, provided my tomatoes are exactly the same that I bought yesterday from the grocery store or today from the grocery store. If there is any variability in my tomatoes, if one is greener or yellow or anything, I have to adjust the recipe to get the same taste.
Hmm.
Similarly, here, unless I can adapt my recipe, I'm going to get inconsistent product.
Hmm.
So we need to solve for that. And how do we solve for that? We solve for that by understanding the process biology. We need to understand the attributes, the key attributes of the raw material, which is the cells, T cells or stem cells, and their impact on the process, on the recipe. Now, not every attribute will have the same impact on the process. So I need to understand which attribute is most sensitive to the process variation so that I can tune it down by adjusting that on the process side to get a more consistent product.
Hmm.
So that's the fundamental challenge that we have, that we are not able to make this at scale consistently. And the other scaling problem is that we don't have economies of scale here. We're not just saying, I'm the only change that I'm when I increase the volume is a variable cost. Here I am, it's one batch, one patient. So it's a scale out problem rather than a scale up. Scale up, I can
Hmm.
get economies of scale. So here I do not. So that the cost is the other
Yeah.
challenge. Now, okay, how do we solve for this, right? People have been saying that, oh, automation and robotics will solve this. And and I think this was proven not true when we recently ran an industry roundtable. There were senior leaders, technical operations leaders that joined a roundtable, and we discussed this very problem and the levers that we could pull to solve this. It was very clear that automation and robotics, while helpful, is not the complete answer. And why is that?
Hmm.
Now, automation and robotics alone can solve for the variability that is inherent due to humans. Because if it's a manual process, you replace it by robots, robots will be very consistent in repeating the procedure versus a human
Hmm.
would do in many cases. So you can remove some variability in the inherent process, and you can also increase the speed, right? You can, because robot may work faster than humans. So that's clear. And that means that if I don't need as many people and I can increase the speed, I can, you know, theoretically reduce my labor costs and I can reduce my footprint of the manufacturing site as well, because
Mm.
robots would not require as much space, and my environmental conditions too. Humans can carry germs, sterility requirements are a lot stringent, but robots, my environmental conditions and requirements are also lower. So, in other words, robots and automations can decrease cost from labor reduction, from a site maintenance in the site square foot, the number of size of the plant that I need. All that is very good, and people
Mm.
recognize that. But we also have the other problem, which is the adaptable recipe. I need to understand the process biology. So yes, automation can help because I can digitize my process and start interrogating my data to see and do experiments to understand which variable is impacting the process the most, causing the the variability in the final product. So I think that's what we discussed, and we said, okay, robotics and automation can help, but it has to be deliberate that we use automation and robotics not just to decrease costs, but also to understand process biology. Otherwise, it won't be very helpful. Now, why there's hesitation in adopting is a couple of reasons. One is that if you look around, and then we saw that in our report, is that early stage companies, the pre-commercial companies, are usually funded through the investors from venture capitalists and others, or
Mm.
self-funded. They are constrained in resources, and adopting digital is expensive. So while they know this is the right thing to do, they just do not have enough resources to even adopt digital. And the second reason that we often get is that it's too early. We're still experimenting. We don't know how the process is going to be, how we're going to
Mm.
make the product. So we will get to the digital once we have um, beyond the proof of concept or beyond the inflection point, which is roughly phase 1B, 1A. And that's when we may adopt. So there's a delay in adoption for that reason, uncertainty in the science, and the two is the resources. That's really the story of the smaller companies, and also for the biopharma who are in early stage uh, asset development. The second reason is, well, if you're further down the road in your development cycle or you're in commercial, then you have filed FDA approval through a process that you know and technology that you're using, and FDA approved your
Mm.
product, or you've collected so much data already on existing technology. So, do the conversion to a new technology, to automation and robotics, you have to prove that you have not changed the product characteristics and you're making the same
Mm.
product. So the equivalency becomes a challenge, and then the regulatory discussion, the negotiations that are also,
And would you have to then reapply potentially if you're going to change the process?
depending on the amount of change that you are bringing about, may require.
Mm.
So that also creates, it's a key consideration in the sponsor's mind as to should I or should I not adopt automation and robotics, and what are my implications from a cost and regulatory perspective.
Mhm. On regulatory, FDA approvals do seem to now be moving a lot quicker with accelerated approval times. What kind of impact do you think that's made in the US?
So certainly we are getting approvals at a very, very healthy clip, right?
Mm.
And that goes back to my point earlier about the hubris of science. We're all excited. Look at that. Look at this. Another therapy, which
Mm.
is fantastic. But then, of course, we have operational challenges. But what it is also doing, frankly, Luke, is that we have accelerated approvals. So when it used to take almost 10 years from idea to the launch, now it's almost happening half the time sometimes because we have the breakthrough designation,
Mm.
accelerated approval. That is a huge implication, two in particular. One is our understanding of the process that we're talking about, process biology. We're running so fast with the rush to clinic So what I call is the develop to clinic is what is happening. And as a result, we get to the commercial and we don't have not fine-tuned, often fine-tuned a process. And
Mm.
that creates the problem, what we're talking about, we're not able to scale because it's okay to make it a benchtop and small clinical trials because now we have accelerated approval. But when you do commercial, I need to scale that up. And
Mm.
we just didn't have enough time, enough data to understand how to scale up. That's one. The second is on the reimbursement side, because now I have the same problem. I don't have enough data, and I'm asking millions of dollars for the insurance companies
Yeah.
to pay for it, and they're saying, give me enough data. I need enough data to do that to make the justification, and and the sponsor then also then have to come up with creative ways to create to generate data and to convince the medical utility of the therapy.
Mm.
So it's fantastic for the patient that we have options, but I think in order to get to scale,
Yeah.
it just often work in the opposite direction.
It's a incredibly complicated web, isn't it, that you're trying to navigate clients through. I just wonder, Sanjay, if you find it rewarding. Are you able to see the real world impact of the work that you're doing?
Oh yes, absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. We are seeing the result, and then that's what keeps us going. Both the whole community of our consultants, not just Accenture, but
Yeah.
elsewhere, our competition, but also the sponsors and the hospitals, all of them, because we have treated, tens and thousands of patients with cell and gene
Mm.
therapies
Mm.
by now. So absolutely, we're making a difference. But all we are now trying to do is that we've learned quite a bit. Let's increase that volume exponentially and let's do it faster.
Yeah.
And that's what we're all trying to do. And everybody is aligned that that's what needs to happen. But it's a learning curve, and it's going to take some time, but we'll get there.
Mm. Fascinating, isn't it, to see the industry evolve?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I personally started, we had only scores of patients being treated with CAR T by mid 2010s,
Mm.
but now we have tens and thousands.
Sanjay, thank you so much for your time today. Pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you, Luke, for having me here. Look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you so much.